How does a two-time UFC heavyweight champion, once feared as the most relentless fighter alive, end up behind prison walls instead of inside the fame buzz? The story of Cain Velasquez is one of triumph turned tragedy. A proud Mexican-American icon celebrated for his stamina, dominance, and humility. To fans, he was a warrior, a role model, and a family man. But in 2022, one moment of vigilante justice altered his life forever. Velasquez chased down a man accused of abusing a young relative and fired into a moving vehicle, an act that sent shockwaves through the MMA world. By 2025, that single decision had cost him his freedom. He stood in court, sentenced to 5 years in prison. This is the story of how Cain Velasquez went from world champion to convicted felon. Cain's journey began long before the UFC lights. Born in Salinas, California, in 1982, he grew up in a tight-knit Mexican-American household built on discipline, sacrifice, and loyalty. His father, an immigrant who crossed the border illegally before later gaining residency, taught him that success was earned through grit, not shortcuts. That mindset would become Cain's identity, the foundation of both his glory and his downfall. Cain first made his mark on the wrestling mats. At Kofa High School in Arizona, his legendary gas tank emerged. While others collapsed after practice, Cain kept grinding, pushing through pain as if fatigue didn't exist. That same relentless drive carried him to Arizona State University, where he became a two-time All-American. By then, his reputation was clear. Cain didn't just out-wrestle you, he broke your will. But wrestling was only the start. Velasquez transitioned into MMA when the heavyweight division was still dominated by massive, slow brawlers who gassed out quickly. Training at American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, he evolved. He added crisp boxing, powerful kicks, and devastating ground and pound to his wrestling base. When Cain debuted in the UFC in 2008, he wasn't the biggest or flashiest heavyweight, but he was the scariest. He fought with a pace no one could match. He could throw triple-digit strikes, chain takedowns endlessly, and never slow down. His early fights revealed a new breed of heavyweight. When Cain demolished Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, a Pride legend and one of the sport's most respected veterans, fans realized they were watching greatness unfold. Analysts and commentators began declaring him the future of the division. Unlike the loudmouths and showmen, Cain was soft-spoken and humble. But once the cage door closed, he transformed into a storm of controlled violence. Training partners whispered about his sparring sessions, describing them as nightmares that left men gasping for breath. That reputation earned him the nickname, Cardio Cain. The UFC saw more than a fighter in Velasquez, they saw a cultural breakthrough. His Mexican heritage offered the chance to connect with one of combat sports' most passionate fan bases. For Cain, it was pride. For the UFC, it was marketing gold. They branded him as the heavyweight champion who represented Mexico, a fighter who could inspire millions. And in 2010, Cain fulfilled that promise. At UFC 121, he stepped into the cage against Brock Lesnar, a massive former WWE star and the UFC's biggest draw. Many believed Lesnar's sheer size and power would crush Velasquez. Instead, Cain dismantled him with surgical precision. He stuffed takedowns, battered him with punches, and forced a first-round TKO. That night, Cain Velasquez became the UFC heavyweight champion. His title run cemented him as a superstar. His trilogy with Junior Dos Santos became the stuff of legend. After being knocked out in their first meeting, Cain came back with a vengeance. In the rematch, he delivered one of the most lopsided beatdowns in UFC history, smothering Dos Santos for 5 brutal rounds. In the rubber match, he did it again, proving beyond doubt who was the better fighter. Along the way, Velasquez destroyed contenders like Antonio, Bigfoot, Silva and Travis Brown, making it look easy. Many began to argue he wasn't just champion, he might be the greatest heavyweight ever. But injuries stalked him. His intense training style, once the source of his dominance, became his downfall. Shoulder surgeries, back issues, and knee problems robbed him of years in his prime. Still, every time he returned, he reminded fans of his dominance. He remained a hero, the Mexican warrior, the humble family man, the symbol of discipline and heart. And yet, it was those very values, loyalty, protectiveness, devotion to family, that would one day push him over the edge. The turning point didn't come in the Octagon. It came in February 2022, when Cain learned of allegations that Harry Goularde, connected to a family daycare, had molested a young relative of his. The news devastated him. For Cain, family was sacred. To hear that someone had hurt a child he loved struck deeper than any knockout or injury ever could. Goularde was arrested. But soon after, he was released on bail. To Cain, it was a betrayal. The justice system had failed his family. The man accused of violating their trust was free, living his life, while Cain's loved ones suffered in silence. Rage consumed him. Those closest to him described him as broken, unable to accept that the system would protect the accused rather than the victim. The fighter who had spent his life obeying rules now faced a situation where he believed the rules were meaningless. And so he decided to act. On February 28, 2022, Cain Velasquez pursued a vehicle carrying Goularde, his stepfather Paul Bender, and another passenger. Witnesses described a wild, high-speed chase through Santa Clara County. At some point, Cain pulled a gun and opened fire. His bullet struck Bender, the stepfather, instead of Goularde. Though the injuries were not fatal, the damage was done. The MMA world was stunned. The headlines were surreal. Cain Velasquez arrested for attempted murder. The man once celebrated for his calm and composure had snapped in the most reckless way possible. Fans were torn. Some called him a hero for protecting his family. Others condemned him for endangering innocent lives. Hashtags like #FreeCain trended, while critics insisted that no amount of fame excused his actions. Cain was denied bail and spent months behind bars awaiting trial. For a man once in control of every fight, the helplessness was crushing. Gone were the crowds, the cameras, the glory. In their place were court hearings, prison walls, and endless uncertainty. Supporters sent letters and messages, and Cain sometimes smiled in court, but behind the public mask was a man weighed down by regret. By March 2025, after years of delays, Cain stood in court to face his fate. He entered a plea of no contest to attempted murder, avoiding a lengthy trial but accepting punishment. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in state prison. The image of Cain Velasquez, once the most feared man in the cage, standing with his head bowed as his sentence was read was a gut punch to fans worldwide. His legacy, once written in knockouts and championships, was now scarred by courtrooms and mugshots. But there was a twist. While the headlines screamed, 5 years, legal details soon revealed that Cain's time spent in custody since 2022 would count toward his sentence. In reality, he was expected to serve about 1 more year before being eligible for release. Supporters cheered, calling it a small victory. Critics raged, saying justice had been undermined. No matter where people stood, one truth remained: Cain Velasquez's story, from proud champion to convicted felon, will forever be one of the most shocking rises and falls in combat sports history.